The alarm screamed through Riverside County Correctional Facility like a wounded animal, its electronic wail bouncing off concrete walls that had heard too many desperate sounds. Officer Marcus Chen's radio crackled with static and panic as he sprinted down Corridor C, his German Shepherd partner Ajax keeping perfect pace beside him, muscles coiled like steel springs beneath his dark coat. "All units, code orange. Inmate 47829 missing from transport. Last seen..." The transmission cut into white noise, but Marcus didn't need to hear the rest. He knew that number. Danny Morrison, 22 years old, armed robbery, scheduled for a... Caught in 2 hours. Ajax's ears snapped forward, nostrils flaring as they rounded the corner toward the loading dock. The dog's behavior shifted, not the focused intensity of a tracking command, but something else. Something that made the fur along his spine rise in a ridge of warning. The transport van sat empty, its rear doors hanging open like broken wings. Blood droplets led away from the vehicle in an erratic pattern, too scattered to be purposeful, too random to follow. But Ajax wasn't looking at the blood. His dark eyes were fixed on something in the shadows beyond the fence line, his massive head cocked at an angle that Marcus had learned to read like scripture. "What is it, boy?" Marcus whispered, his hand instinctively moving to his service weapon. Ajax whined, not the eager sound of a dog ready to hunt, but something haunted, almost mournful. The security footage would later show what happened next, though no one could explain it. Ajax, the most disciplined K9 in the department's history, broke formation. He didn't run toward the scent trail like his training demanded. Instead, he turned and bolted in the opposite direction, toward the old maintenance building that had been abandoned for 3 years. Marcus's boots pounded against cracked asphalt as he followed, his heart hammering against his ribs. Ajax had never disobeyed a command. Never. In 4 years of partnership, through drug busts and manhunts, through the chaos of riots and the quiet intensity of search and rescue, the dog had been flawless. Perfect. Until now. The maintenance building loomed ahead, its windows dark and broken, weeds growing through cracks in the foundation. Ajax skidded to a stop at the rusted door, his entire body trembling, not with excitement but with something that looked disturbingly like grief. Marcus reached for the door handle, his fingers closing around cold metal that felt like ice against his palm. The hinges shrieked as the door swung open, revealing nothing but darkness and the smell of rust and decay. But Ajax pushed past him, disappearing into the shadows with a determination that bordered on desperation. "Ajax, heel!" Marcus's command echoed in the empty space, but the dog didn't stop, didn't even slow down. Marcus fumbled for his flashlight, the beam cutting through darkness to reveal a maze of old pipes and forgotten equipment. And there, in the far corner, Ajax sat perfectly still beside something that made Marcus's blood turn to ice water. Danny Morrison lay crumpled against the wall, his orange jumpsuit torn and bloody. But he wasn't trying to escape. He wasn't moving at all. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, and his chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate gasps. This wasn't an escape attempt. This was a hunt. And Danny Morrison was the prey. Ajax pressed, his nose against the young man's hand, the same gesture he'd seen the dog make 1,000 times before, but never like this. Never with such careful, deliberate gentleness, as if he were trying to comfort someone who was dying. "Jesus," Marcus breathed, dropping to his knees beside the injured prisoner. "What happened to you, kid?" Danny's lips moved, forming words too, quiet to hear. Marcus leaned closer, close enough to smell the fear sweat and blood, close enough to see the terror in eyes that should have belonged to someone much older. "He found me," Danny whispered, "just like you said he would." Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. Those words, he'd heard them before. Same voice, same desperate whisper, but that was impossible. That had been 3 years ago, in another place, another life, before Ajax, before everything changed. The radio on his belt squawked back to life. "Chen, what's your location? We need that K9 unit at the perimeter. We've got a scent trail heading toward the highway." Marcus stared down at Danny Morrison, then at Ajax, who hadn't moved from his protective position beside the wounded prisoner. The dog's dark eyes met his, and in that moment Marcus saw something that made his hands shake as he reached for his radio. Recognition. Ajax knew this boy. Somehow, impossibly, the dog knew Danny Morrison, and the way Ajax was looking at him, gentle, protective, almost loving, was the same way he'd looked at... "No," Marcus whispered, the radio falling from nerveless fingers. "That's not possible." But Ajax's tail gave a single slow wag, the first wag Marcus had seen from his partner in over a year, and in that small gesture, a door opened to a past that Marcus had buried so deep he'd almost convinced himself it never happened. Almost. The maintenance building fell silent, except for Danny's labored breathing and the distant wail of sirens. Somewhere in the darkness a truth waited that would change everything Marcus thought he knew about his partner, about his job, about the thin line between justice and mercy that he walked every single day. Ajax nuzzled Danny's hand again, and the young man's eyes focused for just a moment, meeting Marcus's gaze with startling clarity. "He remembers me," Danny whispered. "Even after all this time, he remembers." And in that moment, Marcus Chen realized that some hunts never end. They just change direction. 3 years earlier, the smell of disinfectant couldn't mask the underlying scent of fear that permeated the Riverside Animal Control Facility. Marcus Chen stood in the corridor between rows of concrete kennels, his new K9 unit paperwork clutched in sweaty palms, trying not to let his nervousness show. His supervisor had been clear: choose well. The department only got one shot at this. Federal grant funding, and Marcus's career advancement depended on finding the right partner. "This one's been returned 3 times, Officer Janet Rodriguez explained, stopping in front of kennel number 7. Too aggressive for families, too independent for standard police work, but his test scores, she whistled low, off the charts. Marcus peered through the chain link at a German shepherd that looked like he'd been carved from shadow and steel. The dog sat perfectly still in the far corner, not begging for attention like the others, not even acknowledging their presence. His dark coat bore several scars, thin white lines that spoke of a hard life before this place. "What's his story?" Marcus asked. "Found him chained in a backyard 3 months ago. Owner used him for protection, never socialized him properly. The dog was half-starved, covered in old bite wounds. When Animal Control seized him, he wouldn't let anyone near him for weeks. But watch this." Rodriguez pulled out a small piece of paper from her pocket, a child's drawing in crayon of a stick-figure boy and a black dog. She held it up to the kennel door. The transformation was instant. The shepherd's ears perked forward, his tail gave the faintest wag, and he approached the fence with cautious steps. When he reached the drawing, he pressed his nose against the chain link directly over the paper crayon dog. Kid who drew this was Danny Morrison. 10 years old when his mom brought him here to volunteer last year. Kid had some troubles at home. Single, mom, rough neighborhood, getting into fights at school. But he connected with this dog like nothing I've ever seen. Marcus watched the shepherd's reaction, noting the intelligence in dark brown eyes that seemed to hold too much sadness for an animal. "What happened to the boy?" Rodriguez's expression darkened. "Mom got arrested, drug charges. Danny went into the system and we lost track of him. Dog's been different ever since. Won't respond to anyone the same way. It's like he's waiting for something that's never coming." Marcus made his decision in that moment, though he couldn't have explained why. Maybe it was the way the dog looked at that child's drawing. Maybe it was the recognition he saw in those intelligent eyes, the look of someone who understood what it meant to be abandoned. "I'll take him." Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "You sure he's not exactly user-friendly? Took us 2 weeks just to get a collar on him." But when Marcus approached the kennel door, the shepherd stood and walked to the gate. No aggression, no fear, just a careful assessment. Marcus extended his hand through the chain link, and after a long moment, the dog sniffed his fingers. "Ajax," Marcus said quietly. "That's what I'll call you." The dog's ears pricked at the name, and for the first time since Marcus had arrived, Ajax's tail wagged, not enthusiastic, not playful, but a tentative acceptance that felt like the beginning of something important. Present day, Marcus's hands shook as he held his phone, staring at the mugshot on the screen. Danny Morrison, age 22, arrested for armed robbery 6 months ago. The baby-faced 10-year-old from Rodriguez's story had grown up hard and fast, his eyes holding the same haunted quality that Marcus recognized in his own mirror some mornings. But it was the same kid. The one who'd drawn the picture, the one Ajax had been waiting for. How is this possible? Marcus whispered to himself, standing in the hospital corridor while doctors worked on Danny's injuries. Ajax lay at his feet, refusing to leave the building. Even though protocol demanded the K9 return to base for debrief, the dog hadn't eaten in 18 hours, hadn't responded to commands, hadn't done anything but sit perfectly still and stare at the door to Danny's room as if he could will the boy back to health through sheer determination. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from his supervisor. Need. Incident report by 0800. What's the status on the Morrison kid? And why isn't your dog responding to basic commands? How could he explain that his perfectly trained K9 partner had apparently been carrying the memory of a troubled 10-year-old for 3 years? How could he describe the gentle way Ajax had nuzzled Danny's bloody hand, or the protective stance the dog had taken in that abandoned building? He thought about his own past, the foster homes, the group facilities, the constant moving from place to place until he'd aged out of the system at 18. The military had given him structure, purpose, a way to channel the anger and fear that came from growing up unwanted. But before that there had been a dog, a mixed-breed stray that used to hang around the group home where Marcus spent his 15th year. The dog never belonged to anyone, never had a name, but he'd always been there when Marcus needed him most. When the older boys got too rough, when the staff looked the other way, when the loneliness threatened to swallow him whole. One day, animal control took the dog away. Marcus never saw him again, but he'd never forgotten the way that stray had seemed to understand his pain without judgment, without words. Maybe that's why he'd chosen Ajax. Maybe some part of him recognized a kindred spirit, another soul that had been thrown away and learned to survive on loyalty and instinct. The hospital door opened and Dr. Sarah Martinez emerged, pulling off latex gloves with practiced efficiency. He's stable, she said. Dehydrated, malnourished, several old injuries that were never properly treated. But he'll recover. Marcus felt tension leave his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. Can I see him? 5 minutes, he's been asking for the dog. That stopped Marcus cold. Asking for Ajax? By name? Dr. Martinez nodded, studying Marcus with curious eyes. He keeps saying the dog saved his life, that someone was after him, and Ajax led you to find him before? She shrugged. Before what, I don't know. Kid's pretty shaken up. Marcus followed her into the room, Ajax padding silently beside him. Danny Morrison lay propped up in the hospital bed, IV tubes snaking from his arm, looking impossibly young despite the beard stubble and the hardness around his eyes. When Danny saw Ajax, his face cracked into the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from him. Hey boy, Danny whispered, extending his hand. Ajax approached the bed carefully, placing his massive head within reach of those pale fingers. I knew you'd remember me, Danny, Marcus said quietly. I need to understand what happened today. Who was after you? Why were you in that building? Danny's smile faded, replaced by a fear so raw it made Marcus's chest tight. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. Danny was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tangling in Ajax's fur. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. It started the day they arrested my mom. I was 10, and they were taking me to my first foster home. The social worker stopped here at the animal shelter first, said I could say goodbye to Ajax. Danny's eyes found Marcus's. That's what I called him back then. I drew him pictures, told him all my secrets. He was the only good thing in my life. Marcus felt his world shifting, pieces of a puzzle clicking into place with uncomfortable precision. When I came back from juvie last year, I looked for him, found out he'd been adopted by a cop. Danny's laugh held no humor. Ironic, right? The kid who ended up on the wrong side of the law, and his dog became a police officer. Danny, Marcus said carefully, who was chasing you today? The young man's grip tightened on Ajax's fur, and the dog pressed closer, offering silent comfort. Detective Ray Hawkins, Danny whispered. He's been after me for months, Says I know something about his partner's death. Says Ajax can help him prove it. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Ray Hawkins, the detective who'd been asking questions about Ajax's training records, who'd been requesting access to K9 unit files, who'd shown up at 3 different crime scenes where Ajax had been deployed, always asking the same questions about the dog's behavior. What does Ajax have to do with Detective Morrison's death? Marcus asked, though part of him already suspected. The answer. Danny's eyes filled with tears he was trying too hard to hold back. Because Ajax was there when it happened. And Detective Hawkins knows that dogs never forget. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight, turning the streets of Riverside into rivers of grey water and broken asphalt. Marcus sat in his patrol car outside the Morrison family's old apartment building, watching Ajax pace restlessly in the back seat. The dog hadn't been right since the hospital, eating irregularly, whining in his sleep, constantly looking over his shoulder as if expecting danger. "I know, boy," Marcus murmured, turning up the heat to cut through the morning chill. "This whole thing's got me on edge too." The building in front of them looked like it had been abandoned for years, but Marcus's research had confirmed this was where Danny Morrison and his mother had lived before her arrest. Where a 10-year-old boy had first started volunteering at the animal shelter, where everything had started to unravel. His phone buzzed with a text from Detective Ray Hawkins. "Need to discuss the Morrison case. Coffee at Murphy's Diner, 10 a.m. Bring your dog." Marcus stared at the message, unease crawling up his spine like ice water. Hawkins had been increasingly persistent since Danny's escape attempt, asking questions that felt more like interrogations. Questions about Ajax's training history, about unusual behaviors, about whether K9s could be trained to lie. That last question had stuck with Marcus for days. Could dogs lie? Ajax certainly seemed to be hiding something, the way he'd led them, to Danny in that maintenance building, the protective stance he'd taken, the gentle nuzzling that spoke of long familiarity. None of it fit standard K9 protocol. "What aren't you telling me, boy?" Marcus asked, meeting Ajax's eyes in the rearview mirror. The dog's ears perked at his voice, but instead of the usual alert attention, Ajax's expression held something that looked disturbingly like guilt. Marcus made a decision. Instead of heading to Murphy's Diner, he drove to the address he'd memorized from Detective Morrison's personnel file. The dead cop's house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees, their bare branches reaching toward grey sky like grasping fingers. Ajax grew more agitated as they approached the house, panting heavily despite the cool weather. When Marcus parked across the street, the dog pressed his nose against the window and whined, a sound of recognition mixed with distress. "You know this place," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. Ajax's tail dropped, and he shrank back from the window as if trying to make himself invisible. The confident, highly trained police dog was gone, replaced by something that looked achingly like a scared animal. Marcus's radio crackled to life. "Unit 23, respond to domestic disturbance, 1847 Elm Street." The address was 3 blocks away. Marcus started the engine, but Ajax's behavior became frantic, whining, pawing at the seat, turning in circles. The dog was trying to tell him something. But what? "Control, this is Unit 23, Marcus said into his radio. "ETA 5 minutes. But as he drove away from Detective Morrison's house, Ajax's agitation only increased. By the time they reached Elm Street, the dog was hyperventilating, his dark eyes wild with panic. The domestic disturbance turned out to be a false alarm. Neighbors had called about shouting, but the elderly couple inside was just watching television, too loudly. Marcus completed his report in 10 minutes, but when he returned to the patrol car, Ajax was gone. The back door hung open, the K9 transport cage somehow unlocked from the inside. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs as he scanned the street, looking for any sign of his partner. Ajax had never run before, never disobeyed an order to stay. His phone rang. "Ray Hawkins. Chen, where the hell are you? I've been waiting at Murphy's for 20 minutes. "Ajax is missing," Marcus said, still scanning the street. He broke out. "Of the transport cage, I've never seen him do anything like this." "Missing?" Hawkins's voice sharpened. "When? Where?" "Elm Street. About 10 minutes ago." Marcus hesitated, then added, "Ray, he was acting strange before this. agitated, like he was scared of something. Silence on the other end of the line stretched too long. "Ray, I'm sending backup to your location. Don't move until we get there." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in confusion. Backup for a missing K9? That was excessive, even for Hawkins's standards. A movement in his peripheral vision caught his attention. Ajax stood at the corner of Elm and Maple, perfectly still, watching Marcus with an intensity that made his skin crawl. The dog made no move to approach, just stood there like a statue carved from shadow. Marcus got out of the car slowly, his hand instinctively moving to his service weapon, though he couldn't have said why. "Ajax, here, boy." The dog's ears flattened against his head, and he took a step backward. Not playful, not disobedient, fearful. Ajax was afraid of him. "What's wrong, boy? It's me. It's Marcus." Ajax whined, a sound so heartbroken it made Marcus's chest tight. Then the dog turned and bolted down Maple Street, disappearing around the corner toward the old industrial district. Marcus ran after him, his boots slapping against wet pavement. By the time he reached the corner, Ajax was gone, vanished into the maze of abandoned warehouses and empty lots that stretched toward the river. His radio crackled. "Unit 23, this is Control. We have reports of suspicious activity at the old Morrison residence, possible break-in in progress." Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. The Morrison residence, Danny's childhood home, the apartment building he'd been watching less than an hour ago. "Control, this is Unit 23. I'm responding." But as he drove toward the address, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was being led. That Ajax's disappearance, the domestic disturbance call, even Hawkins's insistence on meeting, all of it felt orchestrated, like pieces being moved on a chessboard by someone who could see several moves ahead. The Morrison apartment building was dark when he arrived, most of its windows boarded up or broken. But Ajax sat on the front steps like he'd been waiting, his dark coat glistening with rain. Marcus approached cautiously, his hand still resting on his weapon. "Ajax?" The dog looked up at him with eyes full of something that might have been apology. "Oh, warning. What are you trying to tell me, boy?" Ajax stood and walked to the building's entrance, then sat again, his gaze fixed on Marcus. The message was clear. "Follow me." The lobby smelled of mold and neglect, its walls covered with graffiti and water stains. Ajax led him to the stairwell, climbing to the third floor with purpose that suggested familiarity. At apartment 3B, the dog stopped and whined. The door stood slightly ajar. Marcus drew his weapon, adrenaline flooding his system. "Police! Anyone?" Inside, silence. He pushed the door open with his foot, Ajax pressing close to his leg. The apartment was empty, except for debris and the detritus of abandonment. Old newspapers, broken furniture, the skeletal remains of a life that had ended years ago. But on the kitchen counter, someone had left a manila envelope with Marcus's name written in block letters. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Pictures of Detective Morrison's crime scene, taken from angles that weren't in any official report. Pictures of Ajax as a puppy, playing with a young Danny Morrison. Pictures of Marcus himself, taken recently without his knowledge. And at the bottom of the stack, a single photograph that made his world tilt sideways. Ajax wearing a different collar, sitting beside Detective Morrison in what looked like an official K9 unit photo. The timestamp read 3 years ago, 6 months before Morrison's death. 6 months before Ajax supposedly arrived at the animal shelter as an abandoned stray. Marcus's hands shook as he stared at the photograph. Ajax hadn't been abandoned. He'd been Detective Morrison's partner. And somehow that fact had been erased from every official record Marcus had ever seen. Behind him, Ajax whined softly, pressing his nose against Marcus's leg in a gesture of comfort that felt like an apology. "Jesus," Marcus whispered. "What really happened to Detective Morrison?" A footstep in the hallway made him spin around, weapon raised. Ray Hawkins stood in the doorway, his own gun drawn but pointed at the floor. "I was hoping you wouldn't find those," Hawkins said quietly. Marcus kept his weapon trained on the detective, his mind racing. You knew Ajax was Morrison's partner." "Of course I knew. I'm the one who erased the records." Hawkins stepped into the apartment, his movements careful and deliberate. "I'm also the one who made sure Ajax ended up at that shelter where you'd find him." "Why?" Hawkins's smile held no warmth. "Because dogs remember everything, Chen. Every scent, every face, every moment of trauma, and Ajax saw who really killed my partner." The apartment fell silent except for the sound of rain against broken windows and Ajax's quiet whimpering. Marcus realized he was standing at the center of a conspiracy that went deeper than he'd imagined, with a partner who had been living with the memory of his handler's murder for 3 years. "So the question is," Hawkins continued, "what are you going to do about it?" Marcus kept his weapon trained on Detective Hawkins, but his mind was reeling from the implications of what he'd just learned. Ajax pressed closer to his leg, the dog's body trembling with tension that matched his own. "Put the gun down, Chen," Hawkins said, holstering his own weapon in a gesture of apparent surrender. "I'm not the enemy here. You erased official records. You manipulated evidence. You put my partner through psychological trauma for 3 years. Marcus's voice was steady despite the chaos in his head. "That sounds pretty enemy-like to me." Hawkins raised his hands, palms forward. "I did what I had to do to keep Ajax alive, and to keep you alive too, though you don't know it yet." "Explain, now." Detective Morrison wasn't killed by some random drug dealer like the reports say. He was murdered by someone inside the department, someone who knew he was getting close to exposing a corruption ring that goes all the way up to the chief's office. Hawkins gestured toward the photographs scattered on the floor. Ajax was there, he saw everything. Marcus glanced down at Ajax, who was staring at Hawkins with an intensity that suggested recognition. Not fear, familiarity. "If that's true, why didn't you report it? Why the cover-up?" "Because the people who killed Morrison have been looking for Ajax ever since. They know what he witnessed. The only way to protect him was to make him disappear, officially." Hawkins took a careful step forward. "I've been watching over both of you for 3 years, making sure you stayed safe." Something in the detective's tone made Marcus's certainty waver. The man seemed genuinely concerned, genuinely protective, and Ajax's body language wasn't screaming danger anymore. If anything, the dog seemed to be relaxing. "Danny Morrison," Marcus said. "What's his connection to all this?" "Wrong place, wrong time. The kid saw something he shouldn't have seen 6 months ago. Been in protective custody ever since, though he doesn't know it. The armed robbery charge was fabricated to keep him safe in jail." Marcus lowered his weapon slightly. "You're saying Danny's innocent as anyone can be in this mess?" Hawkins pulled out his phone, showing Marcus a series of text messages. "These are from Chief Bradley. He's been pressuring me to find Ajax for weeks. Says the department needs to review K9 protocols after some complaints." The messages looked legitimate, and the tone was increasingly urgent. The last one, sent just 2 hours ago, read, "Find that dog, Hawkins. We've got people asking questions. We can't answer much longer." "People asking questions," Marcus repeated. "What people?" "The same people who killed Morrison. They've figured out that Ajax is still alive, still working. And they know that if anyone ever runs the right tests, if anyone ever exposes him to the right sense or the right stress triggers, he'll lead them straight back to the crime scene, or worse, he'll identify the real killer." Marcus felt his world shifting again, pieces rearranging themselves into a new and terrifying pattern. "You're saying Ajax is a witness to murder?" "The only witness, and the only thing standing between those corrupt cops and a life sentence." Ajax whined softly, pressing his nose against Marcus's hand. The gesture felt like confirmation, like the dog was trying to tell him that Hawkins was speaking the truth. "So what do we do?" Marcus asked. Hawkins smiled for the first time since entering the apartment. "We disappear, all of us. I've got a safe house about 2 hours north of here. We can lay low until I can figure out how to expose this without getting us all killed." It sounded reasonable, logical even. Marcus had no reason to distrust Hawkins beyond the man's admitted manipulation of records, manipulation that had apparently been done to protect Ajax. And the detective's explanation fit with Ajax's strange behavior, his apparent familiarity with crime scenes and locations around the city. "What about Danny?" "We'll bring him too. Kid deserves to know the truth about what happened to his life." Marcus holstered his weapon, decision made. Okay, but we do this, my way. No more lies, no more manipulation. Agreed. Hawkins pulled out his keys. My car's out back. We can pick up Danny from the hospital and be on the road within an hour. They left the apartment together, Ajax trotting between them with what seemed like relief. The rain had stopped, and late afternoon sunlight was breaking through the clouds for the first time in days. Marcus felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying had been lifted from his shoulders. The hospital was quiet when they arrived, visiting hours winding down as evening approached. Danny Morrison looked better, color had returned to his face, and the fear in his eyes had been replaced by curiosity when Marcus explained what they'd learned. "Detective Morrison was your dad?" Danny asked Hawkins. "My partner and my friend." Hawkins's voice was heavy with old grief. "He was trying to protect you, kid. Your mom's arrest, your placement in foster care. He was working to prove she'd been set up." Danny's eyes filled with tears. Set up? For what? For getting too close to the truth about police corruption in Narcotics Division. Your mom was a court clerk. She had access to case files, sentencing records. Someone was using her position to manipulate drug cases, and when she started asking questions, they destroyed her life, Danny finished. And mine. Marcus watched the young man process this information, saw the anger and grief warring in his expression, but he also saw something else, a hunger for justice that reminded him of his own younger self. "We're going to make this right, Marcus." Promised. All of it. They left the hospital as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Hawkins drove while Marcus sat in the passenger seat, Ajax stretched across the back seat with his head in Danny's lap. For the first time in days, everyone seemed calm. The safe house was a small cabin nestled in the mountains, about 2 hours north of the city. Isolated, defensible, with clear sight lines in all directions. Hawkins had clearly chosen it with tactical considerations in mind. "We'll stay here until I can arrange a meeting with Internal Affairs," Hawkins explained as they settled in for the night. "Someone I trust who can help us expose this without putting us in more danger." Marcus felt sleep tugging at him for the first time in days. Ajax had found a spot by the fireplace and was resting peacefully, his breathing deep and regular. Danny had fallen asleep on the couch, finally looking like the young man he was instead of the hardened criminal he'd been forced to pretend to be. Everything was going to be okay. But as Marcus drifted off to sleep in the cabin's single bedroom, he missed the way Ajax's ears perked at sounds outside, missed the way the dog's eyes opened and tracked movement beyond the windows, missed the soft click of a phone camera taking pictures through the glass. Most importantly, he missed the moment when Detective Ray Hawkins stepped outside to make a phone call, his voice low and urgent as he spoke to someone on the other end. "Yeah, I've got them all. The cop, the kid, and the dog, tomorrow morning, just like we planned. Ajax heard it all, but for the first time in his life as a police dog, he didn't know how to raise the alarm, didn't know how to tell his sleeping partner that the man they'd trusted was the same man whose scent he remembered from the night detective. Morrison died, the night everything had gone wrong the first time. Int Riverside County Correctional Facility. Day. The sirens wailed through the correctional facility like they were screaming for help. Steel doors slammed shut. Radios crackled. Officers sprinted. Chaos reigned. Officer Marcus Chen shoved his way through a hallway of panicked guards, the leash in his hand taut with tension. At the other end of it, his partner, Ajax, a towering black and tan German shepherd with eyes as sharp as glass, moved with predator-like precision, his powerful frame trembling with alertness. "Dispatch, radio, all units code orange. Inmate 47829 has escaped custody. Last seen static." Marcus didn't need the rest. He recognized the inmate number. Danny Morrison, 22, armed robbery, scheduled to be in court that morning. Marcus turned to Ajax, the dog's ears perked, tail stiff. Something was wrong. Not just the tension of a manhunt, something different. As they reached the transport bay, the scene unfolded like a bad dream. The prison van sat abandoned with its back doors flung open like broken wings. Blood droplets smeared the floor. Not enough for a fatal wound, but enough to leave a message. One Marcus didn't like reading. But Ajax wasn't interested in the blood. His gaze fixed instead on the old perimeter fence, on something deep in the shadows. He gave a low whine, not aggressive but mournful. Marcus's hand moved to his weapon. Marcus, quietly, "What do you see, boy?" Ajax didn't respond with his usual sharp bark or eager sniff. Instead, he bolted, not toward the woods or the trail, far but away, in the opposite direction, toward the condemned maintenance building the facility had shut down years ago. XT, abandoned maintenance building. Moments later, Ajax reached the rusted doorway first, his body trembling, tail lowered, in a strange mixture of fear and grief. Marcus arrived seconds later, panting, adrenaline burning through his veins. The door creaked open under Marcus's hand. Inside, pure darkness and the musty rot of mold and memory. Ajax disappeared into the shadows without waiting. Marcus, Ajax. Heal nothing. Marcus pulled his flashlight, slicing through the darkness with a thin beam. Old metal pipes, cobwebs, broken furniture. And then, in the far corner, Danny Morrison, crumbled on the floor, jumpsuit torn and bloodied. Barely breathing, not moving, alive, but broken. Ajax stood over him, unmoving, protective. The dog lowered his head and gently touched Danny's outstretched hand, the kind of careful, deliberate gesture Marcus had only seen when Ajax comforted. Dying children in search and rescue missions. Marcus dropped to his knees. "Marcus, what the hell happened to you, kid?" Danny's eyes flickered open, unfocused. Danny, whispering, "He found me. Just like you said he would." Marcus froze. Those words. That voice. It wasn't the first time he'd heard them. They'd haunted him before, that 3 years ago. Back when he was still learning to trust Ajax. Back when everything was simpler. But Ajax had never forgotten. He pressed closer to Danny, his body still vibrating with something deep. Something old. The radio on Marcus's shoulder buzzed. "Again, dispatch radio. Chen, what's your location? K9 needed at the highway trail. We have a new scent." Marcus looked at the boy, then at his dog. Ajax didn't move, wouldn't move. His gaze locked with Marcus's. That's when Marcus saw it. Recognition. Ajax knew this boy. Not from training, not from scent matching, from something far more personal. Marcus's hand fell from his radio. Marcus, softly, "No, that's not possible." But Ajax wagged his tail, the first wag Marcus had seen in over a year. In Riverside Animal Control Center, 3 years earlier, the scent of bleach couldn't cover up the fear embedded in the cement floors. Officer Marcus. Chen stood uncertain in front of kennel number 7, clutching paperwork for a new K9 recruit. A female officer, Janet Rodriguez, gestured toward the German shepherd inside. The dog sat stiff and silent in the back corner of his kennel, eyes dark as obsidian. Rodriguez returned 3 times, too aggressive for adoption, but his reflex scores, off the charts. Marcus. What's his history? Rodriguez used as a guard dog. Abused, never socialized, almost feral when we brought him in. Rodriguez pulled a folded piece of paper from her vest, a child's crayon drawing of a boy and a black dog. She held it to the chain link. The dog stood. Slowly, his body shifted. From hard stone to recognition. He walked up and pressed his nose to the paper. Rodriguez, that drawing? Kid named Danny Morrison. Used to come here after school, volunteered. Said this dog was the only one who understood him. Marcus studied the shepherd. Marcus. What happened to the kid? Rodriguez looked away. Rodriguez. Mom arrested on drug charges. He disappeared into the foster system. No one's heard from him since. The dog hadn't moved, still staring at the paper, still waiting. Something clicked deep in Marcus's chest. Something familiar. A memory of being abandoned, left behind. Forgotten. He opened the kennel. The dog didn't growl, didn't flinch. Marcus, I'll take him. Rodriguez blinked, surprised. Rodriguez, you sure? Took 2 weeks to get a collar on him last time. Marcus crouched slowly. Marcus. Hey, boy. You've been waiting a long time, huh? The shepherd stepped forward. Marcus smiled. Marcus. Let's call you Ajax. Back to present day. INT hospital waiting room. Knight Marcus sat alone in the hallway staring at a screen. The mugshot stared back. Danny Morrison, age 22. Armed robbery. 6 months ago. But the eyes, they were the same. The same boy who'd drawn that crayon picture. The same boy Ajax had never stopped waiting for. Footsteps approached. A doctor in scrubs, Dr. Sarah Martinez, nodded to him. Dr. Martinez, he's stable, wants to see the dog. Marcus blinked. Marcus. He asked for Ajax. Dr. Martinez by name in hospital room. Knight Danny lay pale beneath the covers, hooked to IVs, eyes heavy with pain, but alert. When Ajax entered, the boy smiled. Danny. You remembered me, didn't you, boy? Ajax nuzzled his hand again. His tail giving a small, slow wag. Marcus leaned forward. Marcus. Danny, who did this to you? The boy's smile faded. His eyes filled with fear. Danny. You wouldn't believe me. Marcus. Try me. Danny's fingers tightened in Ajax's fur. Danny, detective. Ray Hawkins. He said Ajax saw something from before, said the dog could remember what happened the night your partner died. Marcus froze. His blood turned cold. Marcus. What night? Danny. The night your department said was an accident. Danny looked up, eyes wide and haunted. Danny Ajax saw it all, he never forgot. INT hospital room. Knight Marcus stared at the boy, every instinct inside him warring between disbelief and a dawning horror. Marcus. What do you mean? Ajax saw it. Danny, quietly. He was there the night Detective Morrison died. He remembers. Danny turned his head and looked at the dog, who now sat beside the hospital bed like a guardian angel, still, alert, and silent. Danny. He was his partner. Before you. Marcus's mind reeled, his jaw clenched. Everything he thought. He knew about Ajax, the assignment, the training files, the adoption. It all started to feel staged. Like a play written to hide something or someone. Marcus. That's not possible. I was told Ajax came from a shelter. That he was abandoned. Danny. They lied. Someone buried his history. Someone wanted him gone. The room was quiet. The hum of machines, the only background noise. Marcus reached for the chair, slowly sitting down beside the bed. Marcus. Who's they, Danny? Start from the beginning. Danny swallowed, wincing from the pain in his ribs. Danny. The day after my mum was arrested, Detective Morrison came to see me. He said he was trying to help her, that something wasn't right in the department. He promised to protect me. And then he disappeared. Marcus. Your case was listed under Hawkins. Danny nodded. Danny, because Hawkins took it over after Morrison died. He was the one who said Ajax was too traumatized to work again. He filed the transfer paperwork, but he didn't retire the dog. He dumped him in the system, erased everything. Marcus's gut churned. He remembered Hawkins's constant questions, his interest in Ajax's behavior, his warnings to keep an eye on the dog's instincts. And now a truth he hadn't dared consider began to form. INT precinct. Early morning, Marcus sat alone in the K9 unit office. The rest of the building buzzed with activity. Another shift change, another round of reports. But inside this small room, silence reigned. He pulled out Ajax's adoption file. Marcus flips pages, training logs, shelter paperwork, handler compatibility checklists. But something was off. The dates didn't line up. Ajax had been entered into the shelter system 3 weeks before Morrison's death, not after. As Marcus had always been told. Marcus softly. They lied to me too. He grabbed his keys, his badge, and walked out with Ajax beside him. No destination. Just answers. Ext, Riverside. Apartments, late morning. The old building where Danny and his mother had lived still stood, barely. Weather-worn, graffiti-covered, with glass missing from several upper-floor windows. Marcus parked across the street. Ajax whined in the back seat, ears alert. Marcus. You remember this place, don't you? Marcus stared at the broken structure. For a second he saw the ghost of the past, a little boy standing beside a German shepherd, waving through a fence. Int. Apartment 3B. Moments later, dust hung in the air. The apartment was gutted, abandoned, but something about it still felt occupied. Marcus moved cautiously. Ajax stayed close, sniffing the walls, the corners, like they were sacred. On the floor near the kitchen counter sat a yellowed envelope. Chen scrawled across it in thick black ink. He opened it slowly. Inside, photographs. Ajax beside Detective Morrison. Morrison at a crime scene, time-stamped a day before his death. Ajax, wearing a different collar, and at the bottom a thumb drive. Marcus plugged it into his tablet. The screen blinked. Video file. Morrison last recording MP4. He hit play. On screen, INT Detective's office. Night recorded video. Detective Morrison sat at his desk, haggard, exhausted. He looked directly at the camera. Morrison, on video. If you're watching this, something's gone wrong. I've uncovered evidence of falsified case files, stolen evidence and bribes tied to narcotics. I suspect multiple officers, including Hawkins. I think they're going to come after me. He paused, lowering his voice. Morrison Ajax has seen too much. He was with me at the pier, the night I was followed. He sniffed out a stash house tied to Hawkins's confidential informant. That dog is more than just a partner. He's a witness. Morrison swallowed. Morrison. They'll never let Ajax live. If I'm gone, someone needs to protect him. He remembers. The video cut off. NT police vehicle. Later that day, Marcus sat in the driver's seat, his fingers trembling over the steering wheel. Ajax sat beside him, still, loyal, silent. Marcus. They killed him. And they tried to kill. You. He looked at the dog, who responded with a quiet, low whine. Marcus, and I've been leading you right back to them. His phone buzzed. Text message, unknown number. We need to talk. Before they find out what you know. R.H. Marcus stared at it. He grabbed the drive, slipped it into an evidence bag, and tapped out a reply. Meet me at Morrison's old place. 4 p.m. Come alone. XT. Morrison apartment. 4 p.m. PM rain started to fall, soft and steady. Marcus stood in the hallway of the empty building, Ajax at his side. Footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Detective Ray Hawkins appeared, soaked from the rain, but calm. Hawkins. You called, Marcus. I know. Hawkins tilted his head. Hawkins. Know what? Marcus. About Morrison, about Ajax, about everything. Hawkins exhaled, looked away. When he looked back, there was something sad in his eyes. Hawkins. He was my friend, Marcus. I didn't kill him. Marcus. But you helped cover it up. Hawkins. I didn't have a choice. Marcus stepped forward. Marcus. There's always a choice. Hawkins pulled out a flash drive from his coat. Hawkins. You're not the only one digging. I've been collecting proof, but we need to be careful. The people behind this, they're not just cops. They're connected, political, powerful. Ajax stepped forward and growled, low, threatening. Marcus. He remembers you from that night. Hawkins, sighing. I was there, but I wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. Marcus hesitated. Marcus. Then help. Help me take this up the chain. Hawkins. You trust internal affairs, Marcus? I trust justice, even if I have to drag it out of the dark myself. Into hospital. That evening, Danny sat up in bed, bruises fading, strength returning. When Marcus walked in with Ajax, the young man smiled. Danny, did you find out who did it? Marcus sat beside him. Marcus. Not yet, but we're closer, and you were right. About everything. Danny reached out, scratching Ajax behind the ears. Danny, he's been protecting people his whole life, even when no one protected him. Marcus looked at the boy. Not a criminal, not a fugitive, a survivor. Marcus, you're coming. With us. You deserve to see how this ends. Far from the city, deep in the mountains, Hawkins's safe house sat surrounded by trees and silence. Inside, Ajax curled by the fireplace. Danny rested on a worn sofa. Marcus stood in the kitchen, staring at a corkboard now filled with photos, files, timelines. Marcus, this ends tomorrow. Hawkins, one way or another. Marcus nodded, his mind already making moves, but outside the window, a faint glint. A lens, a camera, and a voice, unheard, but understood by the one who never forgot. Ajax's ears perked up, his tail stopped wagging. He was listening. Int. Safe house. Late night rain tapped gently on the cabin's tin roof, steady and hypnotic. Marcus sat at the dining table, eyes red from exhaustion, piecing together everything they knew. Hawkins had printed files sprawled in front of him, bank statements, falsified reports, suppressed evidence. At the center of it all, the truth about Detective Morrison's death. On the couch, Danny Morrison was asleep, curled under a blanket, Ajax's head resting protectively on his leg. The dog's ears twitched occasionally, still on alert. Hawkins. Low. The chief signed off on the whole thing, covered it with paperwork. Morrison got too close to a cartel laundering operation inside the narcotics unit. They used me to stall him. Marcus stared at Hawkins. Marcus. So why now? Why help us? Hawkins looked down. Hawkins, because I finally believe Morrison, and because your dog wouldn't stop remembering. Outside the cabin, a faint crunch of gravel, Ajax's. The ears snapped up. Marcus. Low. You hear that? Ajax stood. Another noise. A twig snapping. Marcus grabbed his weapon and reached for his flashlight. Marcus. Danny. Wake up. Danny jolted awake as Ajax moved toward the front window. His body stiffened, tail lowered in a warning arc. Someone was out there. Out there. Hawkins. I didn't tell anyone where we were. Marcus, you sure? Suddenly, the power cut out. The cabin plunged into darkness. Ajax. Low growl. Marcus grabbed the flashlight and moved toward the window. A silhouette darted past. Marcus down. Glass. Shattered. A bullet ripped through the living room window. Hawkins tackled Danny to the ground. Ajax sprang toward the door, barking with full force now, the primal snarl of a trained protector prepared for war. XT. Cabin. Moments later, 3 men approached from the woods, dressed in tactical black, weapons raised, but they weren't. Cartel, they were police. Marcus saw it through the slats, badges on their belts. Marcus to Hawkins. You said internal affairs. Hawkins. I told one guy I trusted. Marcus. You trusted the wrong guy. Another bullet. This one embedded in the wall inches from Danny. Ajax barked again, but not just a warning. He recognized the scent. Int. Cabin. Continuous, Marcus reached for Danny and pulled him behind the kitchen island. Marcus. They're here to tie up loose. Hens Hawkins. Let me talk to them, Marcus. You step outside and they'll kill you first. Suddenly Ajax sprinted toward the front door. Marcus. No, Ajax. But the dog was gone, tearing through the opening and disappearing into the darkness. XT. Woods. Night flashlights bobbed through the trees. One of the approaching officers heard a rustle behind him. He turned. Too late. Ajax leaped from the shadows, slamming into him with crushing force. The officer hit the ground, gun flying from his hand. Another turned to fire. Ajax disappeared into the brush. Chaos erupted. Marcus used the distraction. He led Danny out through the back, Hawkins behind. They ducked into the trees just as more vehicles pulled up. Hawkins. We need to split up. They'll kill the kid if they catch him. Marcus. No, we end this tonight. Int. Abandoned warehouse. 2 hours later, an old sawmill at the river's edge. Marcus had texted one number, a contact Morrison had written about in his journal. Detective. Risa Valdez, Internal Affairs, the only person Morrison trusted. Ajax led them there, tail flicking low, body tight. The dog stopped suddenly outside a large wooden door. Inside, 3 SUVs, one familiar figure pacing in front of them. Chief Bradley. Ajax growled, deep and guttural. Danny's eyes widened. Danny, that's him. That's the man from the alley. The one who threatened my mom. That's the man Morrison was investigating. Hawkins, son of a, he never finished. Bradley turned. He spotted Marcus and Hawkins before the flashlight beam found him. Chief Bradley. Well, I suppose this was inevitable. He signaled. 2 officers stepped forward, weapons raised. Marcus. You're under arrest, Chief, for obstruction, conspiracy and murder. Chief Bradley. You think anyone will believe you. You have a fugitive, a disgraced detective, and a mutt, Marcus. He's not. Just a dog. Marcus stepped aside. Ajax moved forward. Bradley froze. Chief Bradley. That dog was destroyed. I ordered Marcus. But he remembered, and now Internal Affairs will know too. Behind them, sirens. Flashing red and blue flooded the warehouse. Detective Valdez and 2 more IA officers entered. Valdez. We've got everything. The files, the footage, the confession Morrison left. Bradley made a move for his weapon, but before he could reach it, Ajax lunged. He didn't go for the kill. He went for the hand, the same way K9s are trained to disarm without lethal force. Bradley hit the floor, screaming as Ajax stood over him, unmoving, jaw locked around his wrist. Marcus. Easy, boy. Easy. Ajax released him slowly. Bradley whimpered. Valdez stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Valdez, for 3 years we looked in the wrong place, and the only one who never forgot was the dog. Int Police Precinct. Weeks later, Ajax sat beside Marcus in full uniform. Danny wore a new suit, hands fidgeting, nervous. Hawkins stood behind them, no longer disgraced, but reinstated. The trial had been swift. Bradley and 3 other officers were found guilty of murder, corruption and conspiracy. The courtroom clapped when Ajax entered the stand, not as evidence, as a witness, not legally, of course, but symbolically. His actions, his history, the forensic canine, testimony, it all pointed to the truth he never stopped carrying in his heart. Afterward, reporters called him a hero. But to Marcus, he was something else. Family, a hill overlooking a valley, green, peaceful, a place Ajax could finally breathe. Marcus leaned against a wooden fence, watching the dog run through tall grass, chasing the wind. Danny joined him. Danny. You think he remembers it all? Marcus, every second, every scent, every betrayal. But he also remembers the love. Danny, I used to draw him pictures when I was 10. Marcus smiled. Marcus, he waited 3 years for you, Danny, and you gave him a second chance. Marcus looked at the shepherd, bounding through the grass, his tongue lolling, finally free. Marcus. No, he gave it to me. Some dogs are trained to find, others are born to remember, and the rarest of all, never stop fighting for the ones they love.